Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Before we start with our today's session, we have an announcement. On account of Independence Day, we would not have the Hindu newspaper analysis tomorrow. We will resume these sessions from Monday. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says slanting posts. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. There was an unfortunate incident of rape and murder of a young girl in Delhi. So what happened? Political leaders from political party went up to their parents. They understood the grief and pain of these parents, but in an unfortunate incident they also revealed the identity of the parent on the social media platforms. This is where one of the political party leaders had posted the image of the parents, and as a result Twitter suspended the account of this political leader because it violated the user policy of Twitter, and at the same time it violated the law of the land. So the article here is speaking about this violation of the law of the land. What is this law all about? Whenever there is a rape victim, whenever there is a young child who is in conflict with law or requires the protection, or is a child victim or a witness of a crime, in such a situation that person's identity, the identity of the parents, should not be revealed by any person. Let's say for example we have the section 74 of the Juvenile Justice Act of 2015. What does it say? Let's say there is one of a child who is in conflict with law. Who is a child in conflict with law? Let's say a child who has committed a crime, a murder, a theft, or a dacoity. In all these cases, the child is in conflict with law because it has committed an illegal act, or there is a child in need of care and protection. It can be an orphan, it can be a person, a beggar. A child who is begging on the road is a person who is in need of protection, or it can be a child victim. Who is a child victim? Let's say for example there is an aggressor who's committed an act of rape, or a person has bludgeoned this young child. In such a case it is a child victim. Or a person, a child who is less than 18 years of age, has witnessed one of the crimes. In all these cases the newspaper or the magazine, the news sheets or the audiovisual media, or any types of communication about the identity of the child or the identity of the family members should not be revealed by any member whatsoever. So what is the violation in this case? Because the political leader happened to speak up to the parents, this is absolutely fine, but revealing the identity of the parents is wrong, which is where he has violated section 74 of the Juvenile Justice Act of 2015. Added to this, we have another important section, that is section 23 of the POCSO Act of 2012. What is this section? Similar to that of section 74, identity of the child should not be revealed in such cases. Added to this, information about the house or the photograph or the family details or the school that the child is studying in or the neighborhood information, name, address, so on and so forth, should also not be revealed under section 23 of the POCSO Act of 2012, because the political leader had given information about the parents on the social media. What inference can we draw? We can draw that section 74 of the Juvenile Justice Act is violated, section 23 of the POCSO Act of 2012 is violated, and apart from that section 228A of the Indian Penal Code is also violated as well. In fact, we've also had the Supreme Court of India and multiple high courts have also told as well that when it comes to the identity revelation of a victim, it should not be done about a girl or about a child, because the society can ostracize such an individual. This will lead to privacy violation, this will lead to violation of Article 21, and as a result via different Supreme Court judgments as well as the High Court judgments. And because there is a violation of 228, Twitter in this case says that the political leader has violated the law of the land. Apart from that, Twitter also says it has its own set of rules and regulations, which once again was violated by the political leader. This gives rise to another conflict. The conflict is Twitter is one of the private company. It also has its own set of rules and regulations. We also have the government as well. The government is elected by the people, so it is the people who indirectly govern the country. So the government can come up with laws. So if the government has come up with a law, that is okay. But why is Twitter coming up with own rules and regulations? Will it not be arbitrary? Will it support one political party over the other political party, or will Twitter weigh all its options equally irrespective of the political party? So there is a conflict between the state laws as well as the private companies. Ideally, both of them will have to work together. Ideally, both of them should respect each other. But there have been instances where the government has misused its power, and there are also instances where the private companies like Facebook, Twitter, so on and so forth have also regulated free speech and expression, which is beyond their control. So as a result, what we have to take into confidence is the society's resolve to solve this particular problem. The state agencies must exercise minimal control over the speech, and only in the rarest instances for a brief period of time is when this freedom of speech should be regulated, says this article. Added to this, when it comes to the Twitter, there has to be a transparent policy. This policy has to be clearly put out in advance, and at the same time, irrespective of who it is, whether it is the government of the day, the party which is governing and is part of the government, or it is the opposition party, it has to treat everyone alike, says this article. So basically, as of now, there is a conflict between the private as well as the government. So going forward, what we require is a balance in the system, and at the same time, Twitter should be transparent enough to put out its policy guidelines, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says growth needs steps beyond reforms. The article here is speaking about India's growth story. We can break the India's growth story into two parts. One is before the LPG era, that is before 1990. The other is after 1990. What happened before 1990? We had something called as the Hindu rate of growth. What is this Hindu rate of growth? Before 1990, India had not opened its economy. So we had growth, but this growth that India had seen was very less. This was about 1%, it was about 2%. This had stagnated up until 3.5% from 1950s to 1980s and prior to opening up of the economy. So prior to 1990, we had what is called as the Hindu rate of growth, where the growth that India saw was comparatively poor. So what does India do? India had to expand its horizons. India had to become one of the major stakeholder when it comes to the global politics as well. And India also had the balance of payment crisis. So as a result, India had to open up its economy, and India made a major structural change. What was once a closed economy where everything was under the control of the government eventually became an open economy where the government had a minimal say, but it was playing a role of a regulator. So after 1991, we had the government which started reducing the impact on the business protocols, and at the same time it only became a regulatory body. So what are the steps that Indian government took after 1991? We had a major structural reform. Before 1990, as I've just discussed, Government of India and the governments of respective states used to give licenses to the company. They also controlled many companies as well. It became known for the permit Raj as well. So what we have before 1990 is the government was the custodian of all economic activities. They had to give too many permit Rajas, which means the business activities were not that good because they had to go speak to the executive and government because they had to take the permission for starting a particular business. So what we required was huge number of permits, licenses that had to be given by the government. This was completely eliminated, or the ease of doing business was advanced as well. The second, the private sector was given a larger space to operate. Because they removed the permit raj, license raj, so on and so forth, they opened up the economy. The state had a minimal role. You had the private sector entering into those domains which earlier it could not have entered. Let's say, for example, the telecommunication sector, where the state was the major stakeholder, and eventually you had the private sector also entering the telecommunication sector. So what we had is that we have the government leaving aside all its powers, giving these powers to the business opportunities, so that we had the blossoming of the private era as well. Finally, the balance of payment issue which had surfaced in India during the 1990s was also removed. Why? Because we opened up the economy, we had the coming up of the foreign income to the country as well. As a result, the balance of payments was also taken into picture. So after 1991, we have had a growth story. So this article says that if we have to consider the Indian economy, this has to be considered on the basis of three fundamentals. One is in reference to the GDP. The second is about the current account deficit as well as the foreign investments. The third is about the poverty ratio. First, let us discuss about the GDP. When we speak about the GDP, what we require is the statistics. Between 1992 to 1993 and up until 2001, the GDP at factor cost grew by 6.20%. Between 2001 and 02, up until 2010 and 11, it grew by 7.69%, and the growth rate between the 2011 and 2019 was about 6.51%. You compare this with 1990 and before, what we had was a growth rate of 2% and more as well. So this was restricted up until 3.5%, but with the opening up of the economy, what we are witnessing is 6.20%, 7.69%, and what we have seen is a consistent growth for India. But as of now, it has fallen during the COVID-19 period. So what is that we have seen? We have seen a considerable gradual increase of the growth story after the 1990s, because the government opened up multiple sectors. Then when we look into the current account deficit, we also have to look into how India is able to increase its foreign reserves. India is one of those countries where it has substantial increase in the foreign reserves. India's foreign exchange reserve recently topped with about 600 billion a few weeks ago as well, making the country one among the largest holder of the US dollar. India, in fact, is one of the largest US dollar. We have other countries like China, Japan, and Switzerland, which has a large amount of US dollar as well. India is in this elite club where it has large number of foreign reserves as well. So we were able to expand on the foreign reserves because we were able to open up the economy. We liberalized the policies, trade policies were liberalized, exchange rate was determined at the market level, and there was a liberal flow of the external resources as well. As a result, since India opened up its economy, our current account deficit was also reduced. We have problems with respect to the goods, but that is managed by a synonymous rise in the service sector. Finally, we also have to cover the poverty ratio, and the author in this particular case has taken into picture the definition of the erstwhile planning commission using the Tendulkar expert group methodology. Why? Because as of now, we do not have a standard definition of measuring the poverty, which is why the author has taken into picture the definitions given by the Tendulkar expert group methodology. According to it, the overall poverty ratio came down from 45.3% in 1993 to 37.2% in 2004 and 5, and further down to 21.9% in 2011 and 12. The per year reduction in percentage points in poverty ratio between 2004 and 5, 2011 and 12 was 2.18. So this opening up of the economy has also reduced the poverty over a period of time, says the author. It is only because of the COVID-19 there might have been an increase in the poverty level, but because of the opening up of the economy, what we have seen is a consistent drop when it comes to the poverty in India. So these are the major segments which the author says have increased over a period of time because we have opened up our economy. Apart from these reforms that India has taken, both in terms of structural as well as the business dynamics, it also has to give importance and reflect on thoughts with respect to the equity, says the author. What is happening of late? There are two principles that the author goes on to give. One is in reference to the governance, the other is in reference to the health as well as the education, where the social sector also comes into picture. What is it about the governance model? Apart from bringing about changes when it comes to the structural reforms, we have to focus on the law and order issue. We also have to follow the social cohesion principle as well. If these are also balanced, and we also have a federalistic model where we are also able to coordinate with the states, because it is not only the central government which is important for increasing the growth activity and investments, but what we require is commensurate support by the state governments as well. So the state governments will also have to be taken into confidence. We need to establish more law and order situation, social cohesion in picture, and as a result what we will see is more investments, and only when there are investments that is coming into the country we will see more growth, says the author. So what is the importance here? Governance will have to be respected, federal principles have to be respected, and at the same time the law and order has to be taken into picture. Added to this, what we require is the equality in the society. How do we bring this change? The social sectors like the education, and at the same time one of the important criterias of health will also have to be taken. So it is not about the quantity, but it is also about the quality of education and health. If these are taken into picture, what we will see is more blossoming of India's growth fortune, says the author. So growth and equity must go together. It is not only about high growth and structural reforms, but what we have to push is for changes in all these sectors, says the author. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Afghan tragedy. The article here is speaking about the crisis that is unfolding in Afghanistan. There are about 3 to 4 articles in the Hindu today. Let's take them together and discuss as one single issue. According to Longwar Journal, there are about 242 districts which are under the control of Taliban in the present situation. There are about 65 districts which is under the control of the government, but the other districts are being contested between Taliban as well as the government forces. There are some of the important cities. They have seized these important cities as well. Taliban has taken control over Sherkan Bandar, which crosses with Tajikistan. It has taken control of Islamic Killa, which has borders with Iran, and it has also taken control of Spin Boldak, which is an important bordering area with Pakistan. With these cities under its control, what are the disadvantages for the government and what is the advantage for Taliban? Since all these cities are along the border areas, one along the Tajikistan, next along the Iran borders, and third along the Pakistan borders, these are the major cities where incoming of the services and goods happen. So you have goods that flow from Pakistan, goods that come from Tajikistan, and goods that come from Iran as well. So if you're controlling these border cities where goods do come, so what you would be able to control is the finances. So whenever there are these goods that come into the city, they would be able to collect the taxes and the finances, and the government will have no control over this particular place. And as a result, the finances for the government will be squeezed, and at the same time, this will leave a financial blow to the government as well. Added to this, if they are controlling these important major cities, they would also be able to control what would come inside Afghanistan. Let's say there are some of the countries which want the government to continue to operate. In such a case, they might provide the military assistance as well. Because they are able to control these areas along Tajikistan, along Iran, they would also prevent these military supplies to the government services as well. As a result, what Taliban has done is it has got the financial advantage. It is not letting the military supplies come from other country, so it has major control in the present situation. Now the question is, how is that this balance of power altered in Afghanistan? What we have to go back is to listen at the Taliban deal. When we look into the Taliban deal, the only thing that United States of America wanted was the withdrawal of its forces. It was least worried about the political settlement. It did not want to negotiate between Taliban as well as the government of Afghanistan. All that it wanted to do was to escape or move away from the Afghanistan. As a result, it said that its soldiers as well as people should not be harmed, and at the same time, during the stay of American forces in Afghanistan, they should not harm, said United States of America to Taliban. So on one side, this entire issue in Afghanistan is unfolding because of the sudden withdrawal of United States of America from Afghanistan. This is on the external front. On the internal front as well, there are issues within the government. There are multiple forces within the government, and even if the government had the capacity to influence some of the ethnic leaders in Afghanistan, they could have at least controlled some areas. But even before they could speak to ethnic leaders in Afghanistan, Taliban had captured all these areas as well. So on one side, there is no understanding within the government. There are different leaders within the government. They have friction and tussle between them, and at the same time, they should have spoken to the ethnic leaders in Afghanistan, which they didn't do on time, and as a result, Taliban is controlling majority of the districts in Afghanistan in the present situation. So what are the concerns right now? One, we have seen in the past from 1996 and 2001, Taliban, when it happens to rule a particular region, it infuses extreme fundamentalistic ideology. Women are not respected, children are not allowed to educate themselves. What we will see is barbaric form of religious totalitarianism that will be infused in Afghanistan. So all the limited gains that have been made in the past 20 years will go for a toss, and it is the human rights which will be the major sufferer, is the major concern as posted under this article. Because this crisis unfolds in Afghanistan, this can also be a problem to India. How? We have our Indian diplomats, we also have the personnel as well, and we also have Indian citizens who are currently working in Afghanistan. These people will be the major sufferers. India has to take care of the Indian diplomats, but with what is happening and control going from the government to these Taliban forces, there is an apprehension about the security and safety of the Indian personnel. If Taliban takes the reins, if Taliban takes the control, starts governing Afghanistan, other terrorist organizations like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed can also get their space in Afghanistan. As a result, this could be a security threat to India. Further, if Taliban does come into picture, we will have the Pakistani military and intelligence agency, which will have a say in the activities of the Taliban, activities in the Afghanistan government, and as a result, India will be the major sufferer, says this article. In fact, when Taliban takes over, what we will also see is radicalization along the borders of India, and added to this, we have also had the economy as well. Since we did not want to go through Pakistan to Afghanistan, we also developed the Chabahar port. But with now the Taliban at the helm of the affairs, they might not continue with the Chabahar port approach, and as a result, our exports to Afghanistan might reduce over a period of time, and our exports to Central Asia via Afghanistan will also come under loss as well. So our economy, which was banking on exports to Afghanistan, will also be the major sufferer. In order to overcome these issues, India has four options to look at. We continue to support the democratically elected government, and we do not recognize Taliban. In such a case, we would have a cordial relationship with the government, but this will be at the cost of Taliban. And at the same time, directly, if we are not supporting the government, at least indirectly we can support the government by providing military supplies by alternative channels. So we are not directly engaging in war with Taliban. So Taliban does not hate India directly. Instead, we would be supplying these military supplies indirectly via different channels. That is the second alternative. Third is to recognize Taliban and start speaking to Taliban. And finally, if all the three steps do not work, we have to wait and watch, see how it unfolds in the near future, and take up the next step as per the results that we see in Afghanistan. Whether it is the democratically elected government which will have control, or it is the Taliban which will have control, all of this will have to be waited and watched, and eventually actions will have to be planned, says this article. Apart from this, we have also had India take up multiple initiatives as well. We have the External Affairs Ministry, which has already helped about 383 members of the Hindu and the Sikh community, and it will also continue to provide all types of assistance to the minorities in Afghanistan as well. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says an Indian sailed to navigate the maritime environment. The article here is speaking about Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressing at the United Nations Security Council high-level open debate which was about enhancing the maritime security. It speaks about the primacy of UN clause. Both of these topics have been explained on Wednesday's CNA. Our focus today would be on Regional Cooperation Agreement on Combating Piracy and Armed Robbery Against Ships in Asia Agreement. What is this agreement all about? This happens to be the first regional government to government agreement to promote and enhance cooperation. One is to fight the piracy, the other is to fight the armed robbery against the ships in Asia. So this agreement brings countries together initially in 2006, where about 14 Asian countries come together. Today we have more than 20 countries where all these countries have come together to fight a menace of piracy as well as the armed robbery as well. So basically, what would happen? The information that is present with one country will be shared. So there is information sharing, there is capacity building, there is mutual legal assistance, which happens to be the three pillars of cooperation under this agreement. So in the year 2006, they also established the Recap Information Sharing Center. This was established in the year 2006, where in Singapore. What is the intention of establishing this particular center? This will facilitate the swift information between the countries. It will also ensure critical analysis of piracy and robbery is done, and at the same time they will also improve the capability of contracting parties to combat piracy and armed robbery. So basically, we have all these countries coming together to fight the menace of piracy and armed robbery against the ships in Asia. The article further makes a mention of the White Shipping Agreement. What is this White Shipping Agreement? When it comes to ships, there can be three divisions. One is called as white shipping, the other is called as the grey ships, the third is called as the black ships. What are these white ships? These are nothing but the commercial ships. Then we have the grey ships, which are nothing but the military ships. Finally, the black ships are the ones which are illegal in nature. What is this white shipping information? We have the coastal boundaries of India. This is the coastal boundary of India. So if there is a commercial vehicle of some other country, that country will give information to India so that it does not become a security threat. If there is a military vehicle, the same information will have to be given. In case this information is not given, it will be considered as an illegal shipment, and it could also be a security threat to that particular country, and this can be confiscated or suitable actions can be initiated. Let's go back to the year 2008, 26/11 Mumbai terrorist attack. Because we were not careful enough, what we saw was a security breach during that period. In order to overcome that, generally countries usually pass on the information who are part of this pact, and as a result, if such information is not passed on, security officials from India would be able to confiscate such shipments. This is the advantage of White Shipping Agreement. Rest of the analysis is provided on Wednesday, so kindly look into it. Now let's look into the next article. This article says government allows GM soy meal import to support poultry industry. Let's try and understand what is this article all about. We have something called as the soy meal. What is the soy meal? This happens to be the byproduct after the extraction of the soya bean oil. So the byproduct after the extraction of the soya bean oil is called as the soy meal. So this byproduct is used as a protein source. This is fed to the poultry animals. This is fed to the broilers. This is fed as a material for fish, shrimp, cattle, so on and so forth. So what is it acting on? This soy meal, which is the byproduct of the soya bean oil, is fed in the poultry industry because this is acting as a source of food to the broiler chickens as well as other poultry industries. What is happening in the present situation? Because there is shortage of this soy meal at the present situation in the domestic market, the original price of which was somewhere around 34 to 36 per kg, and now it is skyrocketed to about 96 per kg. Why? Because there is shortage at the domestic level, which is why the people from the poultry industry is asking and requesting the government of India to allow for the import of GM soy meal. So the government in the present situation has given relief to the poultry industry, whereby it has accepted for the import of the crushed genetically modified soya bean. So what has the government done? It has approved for the import of the crushed genetically modified soya bean. So when it comes to the import of genetically modified material, it is governed under the Environmental Protection Act of 1985. All the GM import proposals are immediately examined by the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, and only after it gives the consent, that is when it has to be introduced in the market. What is the issue right now? Environmental activists have raised concerns about the permission given for something which is derived from the genetically modified plants. Since the soya is genetically modified, why is the government of India given permission? Is what is this article all about? Going forward, we will have more editorial and column. We will take this article in an elaborate way. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. India's structural reforms for growth must also reflect on equity considerations. Discuss. Next question. India's leadership on maritime security has boosted its standing as a key player in the shared commons. Substantiate. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.